Good afternoon, councillors, officers, members of the public and press. Welcome to the meeting of Children's Services Committee. This meeting is a remote meeting being live streamed on the website and being recorded. I will now hand you over to Denise Wimpenny, Democratic Service Team.
Thank you, Chair. We'll begin the meeting by way of a roll call of all those in attendance remotely, and may I request members to confirm that they have a paper copy of the agenda and can both hear and see councillors in the meeting. I'll now begin the roll call. Councillor Hamilton.
I've got everything I need, thank you.
Councillor Harrison.
Yes, I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lauderdale.
Everything I need.
Thank you. Councillor Lindridge.
Yeah, I can see here and have the papers, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Little.
Yes to all.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Yes to all.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yes to all.
Co-opted members, Joe Heaton.
Yes to all.
Thank you. Joe Wilson.
Yes to all.
Thank you. David Turner.
Yes to all.
Thank you. Mark Tilling.
Yes to all.
Zoe Westley.
Yes, I'm here. I've got all the papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other councillors or members joining the meeting I have not called? No, that now concludes the roll call, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I just remind everybody when they're not speaking just to have their microphones on mute, please? So it just takes away some of the background noise. Thank you. Moving on to item 1. Any apologies for absence? There isn't. Everybody's here, yes? To receive any declarations of interest by members? None received. Do we agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of January?
Yes.
Thank you. There is nothing under item 4, so we move on to 5.1, which I move over to Danielle.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a report for the Dedicated Schools Grant, but this is very specific in terms of the early years block. So the purpose of this report is to provide an indicative DSG funding allocation in terms of early years funding, but then also to propose some recommendations into the early years national funding formula. So just a bit of background, because you'll have heard us before, me and Sandra talking about this. The early years national funding form has set hourly funding rates, which allows us to provide 3- and 4-year-old and 2-year-old provision. We've got a requirement, local authorities have got a requirement to consult on any changes to that funding formula. However, the final decision rests with the local authority within this committee. So just taking you through the report in section 4. So section 4 sets out the rates in terms of the early years block and the indicative funding that we've received for that. So in 4.2, so the hourly rate funding increases for 21-22 have been announced and have increased from, so for the 3- and 4-year-old provision have gone from £4.57 to £4.63, which is a 6p increase. And for 2-year-olds, it's gone from £5.28 to £5.36, which is an 8p increase. So the funding increase for 3- and 4-year-olds is slightly different to the 2-year-olds as I work through this report. 3- and 4-year-olds, we have a requirement for a 95% pass through rate that has to be provided to providers. However, that's not the same. So in 4.4, the 2-year-old provision is different. We don't have to pass that rate on. So in section 5, we'll just talk about the 3- and 4-year-old funding first, and then I'll move on to the 2-year-olds. The funding for the 3- and 4-year-olds is relatively straightforward. So the 6p increase we've received in terms of that indicative funding, and the table on 5.3 shows the hourly rate and then the elements that we have to include in that. So there's the base rate, There's a deprivation supplement that we have to include. There's a contingency funding in terms of being able to mitigate any risk in terms of volatile, okay, issues around census numbers and how we manage that. And we also have to allocate some funding in terms of an early years SEN inclusion fund. We are allowed in terms of the regulations to hold back 5%, which is in 5.10, to support the administration of capturing the information and then passing that out to providers. So that's 3 and 4-year-olds. In Section 6, this is about 2-year-old provision. So at the last report that we brought last year, we specified that we have a shortfall in 2-year-old funding. So when this has been looked at, this seems to be because the funding that we received is based on census figures, and obviously census is a certain day. There may well be children that come into settings after that census day. And the difficulty we've got is that private providers and academies are funded in terms of children in place at any one time, not necessarily just on that census date. So there's a shortfall. We actually do really well in terms of 2-year-old provision, and our take-up's really good, but that actually means that there are more occasions where we miss out in terms of the funding because of the difference between census and other children coming into settings after census date. So Schools Forum have been talking and exploring this for a while now, and there's been, so in 6.5, there's been a task and finish group that have tried to look at the shortfall, understand how we can tackle that shortfall. All of the options, unfortunately, because we are looking at a shortfall in funding, means that there's a reduction in the hourly rate for the 2-year-old provision. And some of those have been looked at, range from 20p to 50p an hour. Due to the COVID pandemic, that task and finish group has actually been put on hold at the moment, just while we try to work through other things in terms of priorities. And interestingly, in 6.7, our latest projections actually indicate that we've got a less of a shortfall this year. So this year we've got 0.034 million shortfall, whereas 1920 was 0.150 million. We are thinking that might be an anomaly because of the pandemic and because of children not necessarily attending or starting when they would have started. So we just need to see how that works itself through. So in Section 7, this is where we've set out what we took to Schools Forum in terms of some of the options. So because we've got a shortfall, the local authority is concerned that if we pass the new 8p, we'll be passing money over to then need to take back off in a year, 2 years' time. So in 7.3, the 3 recommendations were the local authority to keep the original 8p, which was already dealt with last year, and then the new 8p that has been indicated in 21-22 indicative funding, we would also keep. So that would reduce our overspend by £40,000, and it would mean that the reserves that we are currently using to fund the shortfall would last us till March 2023. So we wouldn't need to instigate any of the task and finish group options until that point. The second option is the local authority obviously keep the original 8p, but pass the new 8p to providers from this April. That would mean our overspend is reduced by 20,000, and the reserves would last until August 2022. The third discussion is actually that the original 8p that we had before, that we already haven't passed on, and we agreed not to pass that on last year, and we could pass the 8p on and the new 8p, and the overspend wouldn't be reduced at all, and we would have the reserves until March 22. So we would have to pull quite a lot of money out of the next funding formula, which would be instigated in March 2022. We as a local authority presented option 1 as our preferred option to Schools Forum. However, there was significant discussion at Schools Forum, rightly so, because this is a really difficult discussion, I think, and a difficult decision. The feeling from Schools Forum is that the rate for 2-year-olds is not enough anyway. So to keep the 8p back just wouldn't be right. And there was a PVI rep on Schools Forum who was very, very clear that they are really struggling and really need that 8p in terms of that support, even if it is in the short term. We did have the debate at Schools Forum that obviously if we hand the 8p, if we pass the 8p through, that then means that we need to have some more difficult conversations quicker. But that was understood by Schools Forum, that was debated by Schools Forum, and they still felt that the 8p needed to be passed to providers through this process. There was some consultation undertaken, but it was very, very small numbers. So I'm not sure there's a huge amount you can read into that consultation because numbers were so few. So what I'm asking for from committee is for you to obviously note the contents and the consultation feedback, although it was not very large, the consultation in terms of the feedback. Note recommendation by Schools Forum to centrally retain the 5% in terms of the centrally held money to be able to support the 3 and 4-year-old process. Approve the hourly rate for 3 and 4-year-olds, which would pass on the 6p. Note that Schools Forum have requested that we adopt option 2, which is past the 8p on. However, we as a local authority did take to Schools Forum that our recommended option was option 1, which was to hold it back so that we could keep reserves for longer. So therefore, we've kept that because we still, even though that whole discussion did take place at Schools Forum and that was the right thing to do, we still as a local authority are concerned about that shortfall and the impact of that shortfall. So we have highlighted a preferred option in terms of option 1. I hope that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour. I hope I made sense, but happy to take any questions. And I know Sandra's in the background in terms of her technical expertise that she'll know a lot better than I do.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Nobody? Are we quite happy to move on to the recommendations? So it's recommended that the committee that we note the contents of this report. Everybody's quite happy to note it. No dissent. Note the recommendations by School Forum to centrally retain funding of the 5%. No dissent. Approve the hourly rate funding formula for 3 and 4-year-olds. No dissent. Just to note that the School Forum's requested us to adopt option 2. No dissent. And we are approving the local authority's preferred option, which is option 1. Is there no dissent? That's been passed. Thank you very much. We now move on to 5.2, which I believe is Julie Reid.
Yep, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek approval for the 2021-22 Schools Capital Works Programme, as detailed in Confidential Appendix A. So each year, the DfE announces school condition allocations and devolve formula capital for the school estate in Hartlepool. At the time of writing this report, capital funding allocations hadn't been communicated to us, and I confirm today that we still haven't received notification. However, the DfE have previously stated that allocations for the current year would be indicative of funding we receive in future years, unless any schools converted to academy status or opened or closed. So during 2021 financial year, no schools that the LEA is responsible for in terms of condition works converted to academy status. However, we do know that the DfE have indicated that the funding model will be reviewed this year, but as yet no detail has been released. In paragraph 4 to 4.3, there's some information of what the funding can be used for. And in paragraph 4.4, table 1 details the funding available and table 2 details the total funding required. Should members approve the projects detailed in confidential Appendix A. Moving on to paragraph 5 to 5.3, as detailed in the previous tables, there are proposed contingency sum which would be used in an emergency situation. The next part of the report, paragraph 6, is in relation to special needs places and funding proposals. So I'll just hand you over to Danielle to present the next part of that report.
Thanks, Julie. So in section 6, this sets out our requirements in terms of capital funding for 2021 and to be able to meet the needs of our children over this next year. So a Schools Capital Works Programme report was presented to committee in March last year, and we did allocate quite significant funding to Catcoat Academy to specifically modify the school for children who had profound and multiple learning disabilities, but also to support children with autistic spectrum disorder. We also, they have a demountable that has become increasingly evident that it is not fit for purpose, and therefore there needs to be a rebuild in terms of that. There was a feasibility study, and at that time we felt that the funding that had been allocated was appropriate. However, over this last year, we've had a significant number of children being highlighted as needing specialist provision. Therefore, this paper highlights, or this section in the paper highlights quite specifically our principles of wanting to educate our children in Hartlepool and not have to educate them out of town. So therefore, our focus for Centre Capital this year is for Springwell, but also to explore what we can do in terms of Catcoat, because we're talking about a significant build. So some of the information that has come to light, which we are trying to work through in terms of making sure that we don't have needs highlighted at this late stage, again, is in 6.2. We've got 6 children at reception age in September 21 with profound and multiple learning disabilities. So these are children with significant medical needs, non-verbal, need 24-hour care and support. We've also got 12 children with moderate learning difficulties who are moving from primary school to secondary school that also need specialist provision. So as I said, in order to meet our principle of these children accessing schools in our town, we've worked with Springwell and with Catcoat to try and understand the needs and what we need to modify in terms of the provision. Springwell needs internal modifications and an extension in order to meet the needs of those six children with significant needs. And Catcoat actually require a significant new build to be able to meet the needs of the children that they've got in the demountable and the significant number of children that have been identified more recently. So in section 6.3, I've just set out there that in terms of the build for Catcoat, we've got the profound and multiple learning disabilities children that were set out in the 17th of March committee report. Also, the children with ASD were set out in that. We need to get rid of the current demountable that is supporting a current cohort in there. And we've also got 22 children that have been highlighted with moderate learning difficulties. We did hope some of these children would be able to be supported by a secondary school in the town. However, that's not been successful. Therefore, we need to accommodate them in any new build. We are currently for Catcoat using Seeker in the short term for some classes because they can't be supported on the main site on Catcoat Road. But obviously that's not sustainable. We can do that maybe for the first term, but apart from that, we need to move quite quickly. So the proposed, the 6.5 proposal for Capital Works, which is set out there, is extension modifications to Springwell. We would also like to look at developing an alternative provision for Catcoat ASD children for their sixth form, which would free up space on the main Catcoat site to enable us to take more children on the Catcoat main site for 11 to 16s. So the estimated costs are in Appendix A. The total funding to meet all of this is 3.550 million. So 3,550,000, and the amount we've actually got allocated at the moment is 1.5 million, which leaves us a shortfall of 2 million. What we're currently doing and what we're asking committee for is for committee to allow officers to explore options, which could include borrowing, prudential borrowing, which would we would also look at bids, which we're currently working with Catcoats to identify DFE bids to put in. We need to prioritise Springwell at this moment in time because those children who are reception age need to be in school for September, which is why we've shifted some of the funding around. It's still all to support children with special educational needs and Catcoat and Springwell, but just that the provision at Springwell is of utmost importance. I'll hand back to Julie.
Thanks, Danielle. So moving on to the recommendations of the report and section 15. So members are recommended to approve the schedule of 2021-22 Capital Works programme as summarised in confidential Appendix A, subject to the local authority agreeing contributions from schools towards the individual schemes. B, allow the Director of Children's and Joint Commissioning Services in consultation with the Chair of this committee, dispensation and discretion to authorise works where an emergency, for example, risk of school closure or a significant health and safety risk is exposed. Allow the Director of Children's and Joint Commissioning Services in consultation with the Chair of this committee, dispensation and discretion to add or remove a project as a result of an increase or decrease in the 2021-22 SCA funding allocation. And in respect of paragraph 6, approve the works at Springwell in order to meet the needs of children for September 2021. Approve the funding as summarised in confidential Appendix A for the development of an ASD sixth form to free up space at the Catcoat Academy main site. And approve officers to explore ways to meet the funding shortfall which will enable the new build at Catcoat Academy. This will include a business case to support prudential borrowing and looking for capital bid opportunities. And finally, members to note that officers will bring a report to committee in June 2021 with options to fund the shortfall. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie. First hand up is Jim.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, could you just clarify? I think on 6.4, the Catcoat Academy, I think it's been a long time coming that we need more provision in those areas, you know, to support the vulnerable children. Could I ask it, if we are freeing up space in there and there's a potential of a new build, would there be increased capacity over and above the needs of the town, so therefore we can sort of bring business in from outside, so to speak, and other authorities would actually use that facility? I think that was mooted a couple of years ago. Obviously, I wasn't on Children's Services 12 months ago, but you know, would that be a consideration?
Do you want me to come in, Lisa?
Yes, please.
It's a delicate one, really, Jim, because we need to make sure that we can meet the children's needs in Hartlepool. So we need to be really clear about what those needs are, and we need to be able to traject them. And we're doing some work with the schools to identify all those children. If we were supporting a new build, we would not be able to be looking for funding that Hartlepool would fund, as in through high needs block or other options, and then that be used to support children out of area, because obviously the high needs block in Hartlepool is for children that are within our town. So I think we just need to be careful, Jim, in terms of understanding the needs of our children. We would want to build some capacity in, but we would want to build a little bit of capacity in terms of understanding the needs of our children, not necessarily more children from out of area. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I know if we're going back a few years, I mean, Alan Chapman's a dear friend of mine, and I think he had a dream about building Catcoat up, and you know, I was really supportive of that. It was a centre of excellence to be, you know, and so you were taking children post 21, 25 and onwards. Are you saying that that probably wouldn't be a consideration at this moment in time then?
So Catcoat have done a lot of work in terms of their post-19, post-21 offer, and they do that. The majority of those are for children who live in Hartlepool, which is obviously what we would want. Yes. We would still aspire to that vision, so, and to Alan's vision, and that's his legacy. So I think we just need to make sure, and we do, working with Catcoat Academy, we've got very good relationships with them in terms of those discussions about whatever we would build would be about our children. But yeah, that doesn't mean that they can't have that vision, Jim, in terms of the children in our town and how they support up to 25-year-olds.
Yeah, we obviously have a duty of care, which you obviously know, and I'm looking at the situation, whatever we have to spend if it's necessary, and we have to have prudential borrowing to support that. I'm in favour of that. You can't give the children enough as far as I'm concerned, because they're our future, and the health and well-being of their parents is important as well by supporting those children. Thanks, Chair. That's fine.
Thank you, Jim. Now pass over to Brenda.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I mean, you're dead right, Danielle. Catcoat Futures is a wonderful legacy to Alan, and it really works very, very well. There's just a couple of things, though, that I'm a bit confused about and just need clarity. First of all, the sixth form provision. I understand that there is already some provision for sixth form for Catcoat up on the Breaton site, and wondered if that was going to be developed, or do you see a separate place for the new sixth form provision? And also the other thing that I just want clarification on is, as an academy, does the Academy Trust offer any money towards any kind of building that might take place?
So the first question about sixth form is that we're in discussions and just exploring at this stage, Brenda. The current site at Breaton hasn't got enough space. So the children who have got ASD are based at Catcoat main site, and what the academy are trying to look at is whether there could be something quite specific in terms of that ASD group. But all of that will come into the explorations, Brenda, in terms of those, right. what we can do with that. Yeah. In terms of the academy, remind me of your specifics, the money. Brenda, sorry.
The money. Do the Academy Trust offer any money?
Have to contribute. Yes. So yes, in terms of when we do that exploration and business case, we will have to build that into the requirements in terms of the Academy's contribution.
Right. Okay.
And that would be part of our discussions if we when we come back to committee to submit the business case.
Right. Thank you. Can I just say as well, I think it's fantastic that that this is going ahead for Catcoat School and Springwell. I think that we as a town have very good facilities for special education, and we need to keep supporting it and building it up. So thank you very much.
I agree, Brenda. Pass over now to Sue. You there, Sue? I can't see Sue on my screen, but I can see a hand. I know she did have a few questions.
Oh, sorry, I've got computer issues. It just wouldn't let me click off.
No worries. Right. Remember,
Right.
Sue, if you've got any questions that are on the
I
pink
know.
papers, we will have to go to closed.
Right. My first one is on table 1, the contingency money. In table 1, we had 65,000 left over from unused money, and then this year we've got a contingency of £70,000. Could we use this to offset the main figure at the end on pink papers, or not?
Can I come in there, Chair?
You can, Julie.
Yeah, so the figure in table 1 is the 2020 contingency figure, which is already being brought forward to 2021. So yes, we can use that. We are using that in the figures. So it is being accounted for.
Right. So you've got like an extra 70,000 for 21-22. Is that a different amount of money? Sorry, different amount of monies from elsewhere?
No, sorry, I'll just explain. Table 1 is the contingency we had last year, which we didn't use, which we are going to use this year. For 2021, we've got a £70,000 proposed contingency, which is taken into account with all the funding that we have. We would typically like a contingency figure of around 65 to 80,000 in the event of an unexpected issue arising. For example, if a boiler fails, which could lead to a school closure. So the funding that we had allocated last year is being used this year, and we've got another £70,000 in for 2021 as a contingency for the coming year.
Right, okay. Sorry, my computer's really playing up now. God, it's been good all day as well. On 6.3, am I still, because you're flickering like mad on here, I don't know whether I'm on or not.
No, you are, you're fine.
Right, okay. What are the long-term plans for Springwell and Catcourt in the terms of new school builds? I know Jim and both Brenda have like thingied, but I was under the impression that we were going to have a new build of them all on one site at Breeton, and it seems to have gone out the window because they could share resources like hydro pools and sports halls and stuff like that. It just seems like, to me, it seems better to build a new school than to waste money, because we might need a new school in the long run.
Chair, do you want me to come in?
Yes, please.
I'm not aware of that, Sue. So
gone off.
I can add some detail.
All right, go on then, Julie.
So 2010, it was to be a special educational needs village on the Breeton site. So that was a long time ago, and it was building schools for the future days. And as everybody will know, that the government cancelled building schools for the future, and that programme was to rebuild all of our secondary school provision. But unfortunately, it was cancelled by the government at that time.
Right. Okay. It's just that since then we've had English Martyrs rebuild, we've had High Tunstall rebuild, and Dyke House was happened when that kind of happened. I don't even know if I'm talking to you because my computer's just right. Okay. I haven't got no screen. I've got no pictures or anything now, so you have to bear with me. So I know that programme was cancelled, but in the meantime, we've had 2 new builds. Oh, and Manor College. Manor College is a new build as well. So all I can, I don't want to be wasting money on doing things up when next year we might say, oh, look, we're going to rebuild now.
Yeah, and those subsequent programmes after building schools for the future were called Priority School Building Programme, and it was the responsibility of the local authority to submit bids for those
But don't you think, I'm not
programmes.
being disrespectful, but don't you think our special needs children are a priority need, that we can fit them all in our town instead of send them off to Sunderland or elsewhere?
Yeah,
we can stay in our town.
It was based on condition data at the time, and you had to submit. We submitted for numerous schools, and obviously it's down to the Department for Education to select those schools to go forward based on the condition data. Obviously, we could liaise with CACOT if any future opportunities were provided by the DFE in the future. We'd be happy to assist CACOT in any opportunities to bid for new school buildings.
It's just like, obviously, like you look at like Springwell into another primary school.
The option of being able to build a school is not there, so there's no point in dwelling on it. The money's not there. I do agree, Sue, but
I don't want to be wasting money, that's all.
You're not wasting money because unfortunately that option is not available.
And the other one on the pink papers, you've got boilers on there and there's a massive difference in price. Can you explain the difference? Because and the other thing I was going to ask the question, because do we need to replace? When was the last time we changed some of these for these schools that are in the pink papers? When was the last time they were renewed?
The boilers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll answer your first question first. So the boiler projects identified within the pink papers with the larger cost estimates are boiler plants which serve the whole school heating systems. The low cost estimates are domestic hot water systems used for hand washing and kitchen use, for example, and the cost of these systems are much less. So the projects selected in the priority list are subject to condition surveys, so they all are, approaching their end of life.
Right, that was going to be my next question. Like, do these really need replacing? And obviously, I'm not an expert on heating engineering or anything, so I've got to take your word for it.
Yeah, mechanical and electrical surveyors assessing all of our schools that we're responsible for.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's all. I hope. I'm just going to look at a blue screen now and watch you all. Can somebody put me on mute because I've got no screen?
I'll put you on mute. It's perfectly fine.
Oh yeah.
Pass me over to Shane.
Thank you, Chair. I think, to be honest, you covered pretty much what I was going to say, and just in response to Councillor Little there, I think ideally we would all like to see all of our ageing schools replaced, but unfortunately it does come down to when there is new schemes available from central government and capital programmes to enable that. And I don't think investing in the existing bricks and mortar that we have is abortive or wasted money when there's clearly a need and there is a capacity issue at the moment. So any investment into the schools that we currently have is a worthwhile investment, in my opinion.
Thank you, Shane. I totally agree. The money that we're investing is helping children that are going to be moving over to that school, so it is needed. And as Julie said, that if any programmes arise that we can support the schools getting a new build, then of course we would do that. Pass over to Zoe.
Thank you. Yes, just adding to those comments that it does seem strange that every secondary school has now been rebuilt in the town except for Catcoat, and Catcoat was identified alongside Dyke House as one of the priority and first schools that did need rebuilding back in 2010. So whatever efforts can be made to pursue that, I think needs to be done, because, as I say, it is now the only secondary school in the town that has not been subject to a rebuild programme. And like all special schools, it's expanded massively over the years and needs to continue to do so. And it's not building. When it was identified to be rebuilt 10 years ago, it was only on Catcoat's site, and Catcoat have worked really hard to identify more sites. They're now in 3 sites across the town, but still don't have the capacity to meet the needs of the children. So surely this is now a really high priority, to push every button we can and to shout as loudly as we can wherever we need to around the requirement to rebuild Catcoat and provide the facilities that those students need and deserve, like children across the town.
Thank you, Zoe. I totally agree that when the opportunity arises and that funding is there, then we will push 100% to be able to get a new build. Do I have any more questions? Apologies, I've got to go up and down the screen. So no, we'll just move on to the recommendations. Is there any dissent on any of those recommendations? No, then we'll move on to 7.1. Jane Young?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just give a quick introduction to this and then hand over to Vicky from Adoption Tees Valley. So, as we've reported to committee before, our adoption services is being delivered by Adoption Tees Valley, which is an agreement between Darlington, Hartlepool, Middlesbrough, Stockton and Redcar and Cleveland councils. Stockton Borough Council host Adoption Tees Valley. So this report is, as fits with the regulations, we're required to bring a biannual report to Children's Services Committee in relation to the functions of Adoption Tees Valley and how we are fulfilling our functions in relation to our regulations. Vicky Davison Boys has completed the attached report, so I think if it's okay, I'll hand over to Vicky and she can take you through it.
Okay, thank you very much, Jane. Good afternoon. I hope everybody's had the opportunity to receive the biannual report, which feels by now as if it's a little out of date. We've now already had our Q3 data in, and so we're kind of moving towards the year end and evaluating the performance under this kind of very unusual year. The purpose of this presentation today, committee, is just for information, as Jane says, around the functioning of the adoption service. And the RAA was formulated under the Education and Adoption Act in 2016. And I think Jane's outlined the local authorities, which are all part of the Regional Adoption Agency. Rather than talk through line by line my report, hopefully people have had the opportunity to look at it. I'm going to just kind of really focus on some of the kind of key areas that we've had to look at and deal with over this period of time. The report refers to Q1 and Q2, which is the period the 1st of April 2020 all the way through to 30th of September 2020, although because I do have some data available now from Q3, I'll be able to update and just kind of really give more of an overview of how the year and adoption is progressing in Tees Valley. And I've come today with information around Adoption Tees Valley as a whole, but also some information about Hartlepool and how the children of Hartlepool are being served by Adoption Tees Valley as well. I think that it would probably be fair to say that the key impact for us over this period of time has been managing COVID, like many services, schools, just everybody in society. It's been a very challenging period to continue to run the adoption service with some of the challenges of COVID. But I think that we've managed to do that, and we've managed to work together with children's services across Tees Valley and of course with Hartlepool in order to progress adoption for the children for whom that is their plan. And you know, that's been something that we have given a lot of thought to and looked at what changes we needed to make in order to be able to continue running the adoption service and ensuring that those children could move on to their permanent new families. So I think I came to this committee during this period previously, and we at that point had just begun to kind of really look at the way that the service was going to run with COVID and some of the challenges that we've had. I am, I'm able to kind of really report a little bit more on how that's gone and how we've progressed. I think one of the things to say is that overall, we're really quite surprised, but really pleased to say that all of our evidence from our outcomes and from our data shows that adoption work has not only continued, but it's also thrived during this period. And we have been able to progress more children through, and more children have been adopted than if we compare the previous first part of the year in 2019-20. So that's been really quite surprising to us, but I think is really reflective of a lot of really, really hard work and thoughtful work by many, many people who are working across the adoption sector. I think my first example would be the number of adoption orders granted. That has taken a considerable increase. And there were, I think I had, just looking at it, 45 adoption orders granted during this period. And we are now up to 66 children who've been adopted during this year. And that is actually a significant increase on the previous year. So one of the things that I think I want to recognise is that courts have been able to progress a lot of children through. There was initially some hold-ups within the court arena, but I think that there's been an awful lot of work there, and so children have been able to be adopted. Their adoption orders have been granted, and of course those children have now left care through adoption. So that's been a positive thing. We've also thought very carefully about how we move children onto adoption during this period. We had to do some thinking around how did we continue this. At the very early part of the year, when the lockdown had first started, we decided quite quickly that we would continue to progress children to matching panel. But we knew that we were going to need to hold children in foster care and with their foster carers until we had a safe route for children to actually have introductions and move on to their adoptive families. Moving children onto adoption is a very carefully planned piece of work, and it takes place over typically around a fortnight, but with a great deal more planning in advance of that. For some older children, then it needs to be more than a fortnight. It might be 3 weeks. It might even be up to 4 weeks. So there's quite a lot of activity that goes on during a period of matching children with their adoptive parents. And obviously there are adopters and there are foster carers and there are a number of professionals around those plans and those placements who are all wanting to ensure that things are progressing well. And if they're not, to look at what needs to be changed, what maybe needs to be slowed down if there are any problems. So the challenge of moving children on in adoption has been something that we needed to really work together on. And we introduced a very defined risk assessment process so that we really began to think about every element of that placement. We did move children on. We had a little delay at the beginning of the year, and then we began to move children into their adoptive placements. And that has actually gone very well. In fact, we found and discovered some benefits in terms of our placement activity. One of the things we've identified is that there's been a very beneficial impact for children in terms of being able to have FaceTime with their prospective adopters before they met them. And it's something that we are likely to continue in the long term because children have almost got to know their adoptive parents before they've actually met them face to face. And that's actually proved to be something that's been very relaxing for children, something they've really responded to. So we've begun to identify some real positives. And in the first half year, 45 children were placed for adoption, and that was a significant increase on the same period for the previous year, where we'd placed 33 children. So that's been something that's gone really positively. We feel has been, as I say, the impact of a lot of really collaborative working across Tees Valley, and social workers in children's services and social workers in Adoption Tees Valley, just really working together and really thoughtfully with foster carers and fostering social workers also to work out the best plan for each individual child and to actually make that placement take place. In terms of Hartlepool children and what's been happening for Hartlepool children over this period of time. Children have continued to enjoy really timely placement for adoption in Hartlepool. And again, if anything, timescales have improved on what was a very good picture in the previous year. So the actual total amount of time between children coming into the looked after system and moving in with their adoptive families has reduced a little bit on the same period last year. And that's really encouraging because Hartlepool has extremely good timescales. Similarly, from the date at which the court offer a placement order, and that's heard in court, through to the time at which the child is matched, that timescale has also been a really good and improving picture in Hartlepool. So there's some really, really good work going on in Hartlepool. In terms of the numbers of placements of children in Hartlepool, there have been an increase in the number of placements. In fact, placement activity has quite significantly increased in Hartlepool over the course of this year. I mean, I could quote figures of up 40%, but numbers are small generally in adoption. So it's sometimes easier to think about numbers rather than percentages because it could look absolutely huge. And that's not necessarily the best way to look at things. But certainly the number of children who have been placed for adoption compared to the same period last year has increased, and the number of children who've been matched and moved in with their adoptive parents. And our indicators at this stage are that the number of children who are going to be placed by the year end will have increased also. We have made quite a focus on early permanence over the course of this year in adoption. It's something that we have been planning and working quite strategically across the Tees Valley in relation to enabling children to be placed more quickly with their adoptive parents where it's the right plan for them to do so. And the way that this happens is that their prospective adopters can be approved as temporary foster carers by the local authority in advance of the more formal matching process. I would like to emphasise that all prospective adoption placements are very carefully planned. These aren't rash placements, but they're very carefully and thought through adoption placements. But we have worked across Tees Valley, including with Hartlepool, to undertake some training with all children's services, IROs and managers in the local authority. And in fact, we've been invited to come and do a further date with the IRO team in Hartlepool, which is going to take place towards the end of April. Because what we want is for everybody to understand and kind of have a clear picture of what needs to happen in order for an early permanence placement to be made. But again, the numbers of early permanence placements in Hartlepool during this period has increased, and that helps the children to be moving in with their prospective adopters, moving in with their families in a very timely way. And what we know is that that achieves much better outcomes for children. Firstly, it reduces any risk of movement for children going to have further moves within foster care, but it also helps children to form those very important attachments to their adopters at an earlier stage in their lives. We've had some other areas of positive work that we've had during this year are that we have been able to continue adoption support during the period. We were able to bid for and were granted some COVID adoption support funding, and we worked together with those who were managing and delivering the special guardianship services so that we actually planned across Tees Valley how that additional funding would be delivering more supports to those families where they need it. So that would be adoptive families and families who have children on a special guardianship order. And through that additional funding, we were able to achieve some additional support. We bought into and commissioned a service from PACT, which is called the Adopter Hub. We were also able to commission some dedicated psychological support. And we're also able to commission some non-violent resistance therapeutic support, because that was a feature for a number of families where they identified that due to the COVID position and children being out of school and having increased anxiety, there was more incidences of aggression and violence towards adoptive parents. And so we commissioned some dedicated support there. So we were able to kind of draw down money from the ASF and put that to good use. We did continue with our therapeutic support services quite quickly. The therapy providers who we have commissioned as part of the therapy, the preferred provider list, looked at different ways of delivering their therapy to children and families, particularly where they were already in a therapeutic process. And those children have been able to benefit from therapeutic support also. We've had some challenges during this period. Although we had set out with a greater number of adopters who have been in the assessment process, during the first half of the year, we weren't able to approve as many adopters as we had in this corresponding period in the same year. And I think it would be fair to say one of the big challenges was around some of the health assessments that adopters must have during their assessment period. We definitely had some delays and hold-ups in adopter medicals through their GP practices. I'm really pleased to be able to say that, you know, as we've ended Q3 and we're heading towards the year end, we've been able to kind of pick up and recover some of that delay in approving adopters. And we, again, have already now approved more adopters than we had for the whole of last year. So there have been 56 adopter approvals so far this year. So we've been able to kind of get some of those issues around medical delays resolved. I have had some very helpful support from the safeguarding GP, Dr. Bai, some of you will know, and he's helped us to advocate and he's talked to some individual GP practices, and we've been able to move more adopters on, and we know that we have a number of adopters who are going to be coming to panel in the period in March. So our numbers will be increased by the year end. So sufficiency of adopters has been a challenge, and that has continued to be a challenge. That has been a challenge for Adoption Tees Valley since we set up, and we continue to look at, seeking to meet the sufficiency needs of the whole of the Tees Valley. That obviously includes Hartlepool as well. And, we have been aspiring to approve the numbers of adopters that are required in order to be able to kind of place all of the children in Tees Valley. We haven't been able to do that, and we have drawn down and used some interagency placements. That has created a pressure on the interagency budget, which is outlined in the annual report there. We do expect there to be a pressure. It's not as high as forecast at the half-year period, but we will see a pressure on the interagency budget during this year. We are hopeful that by the recruitment that we're undertaking and the increased work that we're doing in recruitment and some additional resource that has been agreed at Adoption Tees Valley Board, that we will be able to approve more adopters and be able to place more of the children with ATV adopters. Just a word on that, we have actually placed more children with ATV adopters at the corresponding point in time last year. It's just that we have placed more children than we did at this period last year, and so some of those children have gone to external placements. We have had, as I say, some challenges around timescales for assessment, but I think I've spoken about that. We've had some challenges around achieving life story work for children. We do have some children who continue to wait for life story work. And we are taking action with our partners across the 5 Tees Valley to kind of really address some of that and look at how we can sort of really look together at achieving a more timely life story completion for those children. And we're looking at some more modernised approach. We are looking at some digital options for life story work, and that work is underway as I speak currently. So I think that's probably a fair resume of the report. I don't know whether there are any questions that anybody would like to ask or any comments that anybody wants to make about the information in the report or the information I've presented.
Thank you very much. It was a very in-depth report. Lovely to hear. I'll pass over to Brenda.
Thanks, Lisa. Hiya, Vicky. Nice to see you.
Hello, Brenda.
All right. And just really to thank you for the extensive report, and just to let people know that that is a true reflection of what goes on at ATV. And I'm glad you mentioned the fact that that Hartlepool has some really good work going on, because I won't say too much about this, but we compare, I think, very well over the Tees Valley in terms of social work and the work that's done, as I say, ongoing. The panel has challenges, but the things that have been put in place over this period of time have worked really well. And I think, as you suggested, Vicky, actual virtual FaceTiming initial meetings is a good thing. So some good has come out of this, even that will be used for the future. We've even had training for panel members, as I think Vicky touched on, and the training was virtual, obviously, but very good. So everything's been continued very well, and I just think ATV is working really well, and I just congratulate everyone involved in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brenda. I'll pass
Thank
now
you,
on
Brenda.
to Leslie.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a couple of questions, really, Vicky.
Yes.
I know that Hartlepool's always been ahead of the game in terms of adoption. We've always had a really good reputation for that. I think there's just a couple of questions I'd like to ask, if you don't mind. And one of them is about, you talked about over the last couple of years, you've managed to get around 80 children adopted. Of those adoptions, how many of those are successful? And for those where there are issues around the possibility of adoptions breaking down, what means of support is put in place in order to support those adoptive parents in order to keep those children within the family unit?
Yeah, Leslie, that's a really good question, I think, because obviously that's something that we need to really think about as a long-term issue. And, this is not just about placing children and achieving that sort of short-term placement, but this is about helping adoptive families throughout their journey, helping those children throughout their childhoods. And what we do know is through our own practice, but also through research, there's some very, very respected research which tells us that around about a third of adoptive families will really struggle over the duration of their childhood. So in terms of your question around, whether there have been any breakdowns, there has been a breakdown of an older child many years subsequent to their adoption. And, indeed, during this period, there have been one or two families who have considerably struggled as well. And the question about what supports that we are able to offer to those families when they are struggling. Where we know about those families, and one of the things that we're really, really trying to do at Adoption Tees Valley is to reach out to more adoptive families across the whole of the region. Adoption, if I can say more historically, often adoptive families would see themselves as ending their connection with children's services and going on, and perhaps might have had some struggles and not known where to go and not known who to ask until things really come to a head. And one of the things that we're really trying to do is to build up a much more engaged relationship with adoptive families from the outset. So that's something that, since ATV has come together. It's certainly one of the objectives that the implementation board of Adoption Tees Valley set up, and that really reflected the government's own vision of adoption moving forward and underpinned by regionalisation of adoption. We're setting out to try and offer a really strong support offer to adoptive families. So we have what we call a three-tier offer. This three-tier offer has been very challenging during COVID because ordinarily we would be inviting adopters and children into ATV building. We've had a range of days before lockdown where we'd have events, we'd have parties, we'd have art days. What we're really trying to achieve there is that children and families begin to feel that, one is they can meet other families and other children who are adopted, but that they can build up a sense of support and see an Adoption Tees Valley as their centre of support. And that has been going really well. The feedback we had has been very positive about that. But obviously during lockdown, you know, that's a very empty building at the moment. You know, I go in periodically, as do some other people, but really there's very few people there, and we can't engage with members of the public in that forum at this point in time. So we've had to reach out and we've had to try and put our support services into more of the virtual platform. And you know, this is why our COVID funding has been really helpful, to be able to kind of reach out to adoptive families and try and encourage them to use the Adopter Hub, but also to, that's very educative, by the way, the Adopter Hub. It's got a lot of webinars, very much topical webinars for adopters, where families are really struggling, then we would allocate a member of our adoption support team. They would have access to having an adoption support assessment, and we would undertake that assessment and look at whether we can put in place some therapeutic intervention through one of our preferred providers. Within the first 18 months, we undertook a really quite big commissioning process, and we got a sort of quality assured preferred providers list. But I think one of the things that we've really identified more recently is that not all support can be met through therapeutic intervention. And we therefore have this year set about our service plan this year is very much centred upon extending our interface with children's services more widely, but also with health services more widely, so that we can look at, you know, what supports do a family need, and look at actually education and awareness across multiple providers and agencies around adoption and the needs of adopted children. So one of the things that we now have had in place for 2 years is education support. That can be an arena in which children really, really struggle. And one of the things that we heard quite early in lockdown from some of our adoptive families was that, in fact, we thought that they would really struggle with the children at home, but actually their children found school such a difficult environment that being at home was easier for them. But I think you will see in my report that our education support worker, who is co-funded across the 5 Tees Valley local authorities by the virtual schools, she's been able to offer really quite extensive education support, and she does that via individual support sessions, but also through group work and through delivery of programs for designated teachers in each of the local authorities. She's done quite a lot of education sessions for schools and for other people who may have a role in supporting children. So I think what would be fair to say is that we have increased our support. We've identified that all adoptive families post-order will have 1 year where we retain the oversight from their assessing and placing social worker to help really link them and embed them into the support programme that we've got available at Adoption Tees Valley. We've got therapeutic parenting training that we are now promoting as the norm for all adoptive families. But we do know that we must engage and have that that wider access and work in a more integrated way with children's services and with health to try and prevent family breakdown. And that would be not just immediately post placement of the child, but that might be many years further down the line. And you know, that's really our big challenge for this year. I hope to be able to come back and report on that, you know, in 6 months and a year's time, and hopefully be able to describe that, you know, we've been quite successful and we've worked together with some of those multiple providers.
I do apologise. Can I just, we've still got several other agenda items to get through. I do thank you for the in-depth answers. I know Leslie, did you have any more questions? Are you there, Leslie?
Sorry, Lisa. I was on mute. There was another one, but it wasn't important. There's other people who want to ask questions, so I'm happy to let it slide. But thank you for that.
No, that's no worries. Thank you very much, Vicky and Leslie. There is Jim that needs to come in as well, but I am mindful of the time and how long we've actually spent on this agenda item at the moment, and still got a few that we need to get through. So I'll open it to Jim for a question, but if it needs an in-depth answer, I would prefer maybe an email communication or something along those lines. That would be fantastic. Thank you. I'll pass you over to Jim.
Could John Lauderdale mention that he will leave the meeting in a few minutes' time?
That's no problem, John. Thank you.
Thank you. I won't indicate. I'll just put the phone down so I don't disturb anybody. Okay. Thank you.
That okay, Chair? Hello?
Yes, Jim. Sorry, go ahead.
Thanks, Vicky. Really in-depth report. You know, it's really comprehensive. As a former panel member, I'm pleased to see the partnership with ATV is really doing well. It's really good. There's two areas. One is the life story work. You see, that's a challenge at the moment, and I saw that as an important aspect of taking evidence from a child, because when we know it's their own experiences, the important lifetime experience, and it's evidence-based, and it gives the opportunity for evidence that's going to go and bond and give them strength. So social workers can look at that, and prospective adopters. It's also a pictorial, visual evidence. Now, you said you're trying to explore that in there's a bit of a challenge, and you mentioned briefly that you're doing this through the internet, I presume. Is that a big challenge, or how are you going to bring that together so that that child is part of the process, so the memories are there?
So I'll be very brief, Jim. Just aware of the comments from Chair. It isn't necessarily through the internet. It'll be through a digital, a sort of a more digital format, really. And I think what we're looking at the moment, but we haven't honed in and selected absolutely the right product yet, but what we're looking at will very much enable children to be part of that much more and actually maintain that throughout their childhoods.
Right, fair enough then. And just quickly on this one, you've mentioned the caseloads are going up, which is fantastic. Could you just tell me that as the caseloads are going up, obviously the challenge is with the social workers as well, so you must have staff pressures. If there's numbers in caseloads going up, then the social workers will have increased capacity. What have you put in place to sort of support the people that's dealing with that?
Yeah, these caseloads of the adoption support workers are looked at very carefully, and they're looked at. We have a very good idea of what level of work social workers can undertake in adoption work.
John Lauderdale.
Oh, was that somebody else coming in?
He's now exiting.
And sorry, I was a little bit distracted by that. Yeah, we have a good understanding of the level of casework that social workers can take. That's monitored really closely with social workers in supervision, as is their welfare and their well-being as well. And, sometimes we have to kind of look at those issues. We have to look at what people can manage. And, we've been very fortunate where we've had some capacity issues that our board have been willing to support with a little bit of additional resource at times, either when we've had somebody absent from work for a period or due to additional pressures. And we've been able to kind of work with that.
Okay, that was all my chair. Thanks, Vicky.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim, and thank you, Vicky, for the report. So we're just going to note this report. Is everybody happy with that? Thank you. The next one is 7.2, which I'm handing over to Jane Wilson. Jane, are you around?
I am. Sorry, Chair. I was having a struggle with the mute button.
It's all right.
Evening, everyone. So I'm Jane Wilson. I'm the fostering team manager for Hartlepool, and Jane Young has asked me to come along to present the Q3 report, which I think Jane herself ordinarily would present. As you've heard before with the other quarterly reports, we're a heavily regulated service, and part of the regulations require us we have a duty to inform committee and the executive of the activity of the fostering service. Hopefully you've had the opportunity to read the report. You'll be familiar with the format of it now. So what I hope to do over the next just few minutes is just bring out some key areas that I think people will be interested in, and then if you want to ask me anything subsequently, we can do that. So what I would say is, as you're probably aware from other reports, is the number of children becoming looked after in the quarter has continued to increase right across the piece, but in Hartlepool as well. The impact of that is the work of the safeguarding teams, and therefore of the fostering and resource end of children's business is increasing as well. And the result of the hard work of the safeguarding teams, who are mostly based in Bevan, is that we have managed extraordinarily well to keep children, if not with their parents, within their family of origin. The result of which is it's a bit of a double-edged sword in some ways. It means there's increased demand on the fostering service for us to do what's called connected care or kinship care assessments. But the positive is that children are kept close to home, close to the services that they need. So that's a very good thing. Another positive I would say from this difficult time that everybody's having is that in this quarter, and I can't promise it for the next quarter, but in this quarter, because of the work of children's workers in keeping children with families, my team in terms of the turnover of connected care, the work of the panel in terms of meeting weekly as opposed to fortnightly, we've managed to keep the use of the independent sector, so independent fostering agencies, at the same level. In fact, at the end of this quarter, we'd used one less than we had the previous quarter, which is remarkable, really. And the foster carers stepping up during this time to sometimes take additional children outside of their terms of approval. It's credit to them as well. So although this is a fostering service report, it recognises that we have to work cooperatively right across the piece. And as a result of that, I think outcomes for children, though it's very sad that more children looked after, we're doing it in a way that we would aspire to in Hartlepool, which is keep them close, keep them in family if we can. In terms of the impact of COVID, it's continued to have some negatives, like the carers do not like training online the majority of the time, and we've had to do that really right through this period. We have just today met about what the schedule of training will look like for next year, and we're hoping it's going to be a bit more exciting for them. But we have introduced things like the fostering hub and various other online training sessions to people, which they have enjoyed. So we're hoping to build on that, and we've got a schedule, like I say, a bit more exciting for the following year. So in this time, we've also managed, it's been again a quite remarkable feat of engineering to get virtually all of our foster carers vaccinated, which has been a morale boost to them. So they've seen that Hartlepool Borough Council is looking after their carers, and also the carers who are independent fostering agency carers, so not ours as such, but who are looking after our children. We've had some nice feedback from that and recognition of the work that's gone into organising that through Danielle, actually, who's on today, but the administrative staff and getting people through. I'll feed back on some of that in the next quarter, because we've had some, or Jane will, because we've had some really positive statements from carers, and I think people like to hear it from the horse's mouth. In terms of carer recruitment, which is really our key bread and butter, is about extending the pool of choice, if you like, for our children, because one size doesn't fit all, so we need people from all walks of life. What I would say is in this quarter, we're currently 155 foster carers, which for a little town is pretty good going. And in this quarter, we've increased the fostering households by a further 7. And that is comprised of 47 kinship care families, connected carers, and 108 what we call mainstream, for want of a better term. Between them, as at the end of the quarter, they were looking after 264 children, which again is indicative of where we are in terms of demand on the service, because that's 28 more children than there were in the last quarter at this point. So in order to absorb all of that business, which is a combination of agreeing and approving or recommending the approval of connected care and mainstream carers, our panel, the fostering panel, also looks at children's plans. So it's a fabulous safety net panel. I always think of it as all due processes are followed, the checks and balances, the thoroughness of social workers' assessments of families, can the child live there, can they not? And it goes right through to panel, which should be the last little overarching view of a child's plan before it then goes into court. Don't always get that right, but we usually do. And I think that gives panels a cross-section, if you like, of the public and people from all walks of life. So it's our last safety net. Is this right for this child or isn't it? And I think when you look at panel activity for this quarter, it met 8 times, and the last quarter it only met 7. We actually agreed 19 plans in relation to children who needed permanence outside of their family. So I don't think anybody would see that as a success on a human level, because it isn't. It means that children can't live within their family of origin. But in terms of indicating the work that has continued through this really pressured time, and our social workers digging deep into the needs of our children, it's amazing, really. So just as a comparison, we agreed 19 plans, which then went to the ADM, to Jane Young, to agree or not, and she did with all of them, with a lot of debate in between, I might say.
Jane, I'm sorry. Is there any way that you can start to summarise your report? It's just we're heading at 5:30, and we've still got a few more people to go through. So I do apologise for butting in, but we do need to round things up slightly.
Sorry, Chair, I'm there actually. So all I was going to say was 19 plans in this quarter as compared with only 7 in the previous. So I just think it's about getting an idea of the activity that's going on. We have had additional staffing agreed, which this committee will know, which is going to really help us going forward. So that was my last bit. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Jane. I hate doing it, but I'm very conscious of time, that we've still got a few things that need to go through. I'll open the floor to Brenda.
Very much in a nutshell, but I have to say, because Jane's here, but she doesn't usually hear it, but I am a broken record on this, and I always say how brilliant the fostering service does in Hartlepool. So that's it in a nutshell.
I'll take that. Thank you, Brenda. It's the whole service, though.
I do agree. I think it's an absolute fantastic service. So the recommendations are, we just note the report. Moving on to 7.3, I'm passing over to Sally.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a report on the holiday activities and food programme.
was announced by the government in November 2020, and the report outlines the proposals for delivery in Hartlepool over the coming school holidays. The programme itself aims to provide funding to local authorities to coordinate free school holiday provision, including healthy food and enriching activities during the Easter, summer and Christmas holidays of 2021. We know that for some children, school holidays can lead to an experience gap, with children from disadvantaged families being less likely to access organised out-of-school activities, more likely to experience unhealthy holidays in terms of nutrition and physical health, and more likely to experience free social isolation. The holiday activities and food programme is targeted at children who receive benefits-related free school meals, and local authorities are being asked to ensure that the programme is available for all eligible pupils, children in the local area, but it does also recognise that not all eligible children will participate. The council has received grant funding from the Department for Education to deliver the programme, and the funding is expected to cover the costs of both management and delivery of the programme. Local authorities and the providers, as outlined at section 3.5, should ensure that those who tend the provision eat more healthily over the school holidays, are more active during school holidays, take part in engaging and enriching activities, are safe and are not socially isolated, have a greater knowledge of health and nutrition, and are more engaged with school and other local services. So looking at the proposals, we've had very little time to pull things together and get this off the ground, and actually a lot has happened since I wrote the report. We know that there are approximately 1,100 eligible free school meal children in Hartlepool at the moment. And we've looked at how we can deliver a programme at the forthcoming Easter holiday as a priority, because we have limited amount of time. And what we plan to do is then use that whatever we deliver over Easter to consult with children, young people and their families around what they would like to see at summer and Christmas. We are proposing that the programme at Easter calls on a broad range of providers across the town, including council services, schools, voluntary and community sector organisations and potentially sports clubs. However, we also have to be mindful that we now know the roadmap out of the current COVID-19 restrictions, and the only services that will be available to open will be some schools, but also I think it's outdoor sports clubs can actually meet. So some of the things that we might have had ambition to deliver, or we cannot bring groups of children together. So a lot of the offer at Easter will be a virtual offer, and we're exploring how we can maximise a virtual offer through using the internet, through using television channels, through doing self-guided family things, so families can engage in, such as nature trails, etc. We have convened a steering group that now meets with a representative from a wide range of local partners. The delivery of the programme in Hartlepool builds on and is a significant expansion of the activities that the council has previously delivered during school holidays, including filling the holiday food gap, the summer free swim scheme, and also more recently the rollout of the COVID winter grant scheme, which provided provision of school food vouchers and food parcels to eligible children over Christmas and the half term. Just today I have read that that has been extended as well, but I haven't read the details of that, so I'm not quite sure yet how the COVID winter grant scheme will interface with the holiday activities programme. We've just had notice through today. In terms of financial considerations, Department for Education has allocated an indicative grant of £626,500 for the delivery of the programme in Hartlepool. As I said, we hope to do consultation during the activities at Easter to try and then inform the development and evolution of the schemes for summer and Christmas. Child and Family Poverty Impact Assessment has been completed, and the recommendation is for Children's Services Committee to know the work being undertaken to deliver the programme in Hartlepool, and I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Sally. I was part of the first meeting, which was quite interesting with a lot of people and a lot of ideas. So I'm quite happy and positive of the way it's going to move forward. I'll move over to Jim first.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be very quick. It's great to see that we've got this extra funding. It's never enough. We all know that, you know. So I just wanted to ask Sally that Marcus Rashford's had a big push. I'm a big football fan, you know, and he's been pressuring the government in terms of holiday hunger, etc., and the lack of foodstuffs being passed on to children. Do you think that's had an impact in terms of the high-profile nature of a professional football at a high level on the government, you know, increasing funding or giving that funding? Are you getting positive responses locally?
I think certainly the campaigning that Marcus Rashford has done and supported by many other voices as well has had an impact and a recognition. It really has brought into sharp relief the impact of children not being in school and having hot meals. You know, the requirements of this programme is an expectation that children will have a hot meal that meets the school food standards. So it's extremely close to, you know, sort of talking about school meals and, you know, a desire to move away from vouchers where possible. The element of this programme, which I know we have seen in the media over the last 12 months, is around nutritional education, enriching activities and supporting learning rather than simply giving out food. It's actually what we're trying to achieve is assist people to be able to cook on a budget and have you know, store cupboard items and access to information where people can create meals from limited supplies. So there's certainly a lot in this around tackling the holiday hunger programme that I know Marcus Rashford has been so vocal and campaigned about.
Oh, that's great, because it just finally, because there's a lot of skills that the parents haven't got, and some of them unfortunately don't know how to cook, or they don't have, some of them might not even have pots and pans to cook with. So really is important, really supportive of this. Brilliant. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Sally.
Thank you, Jim. Moving on to Sue.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really supportive of the scheme, but what concerns me is those families that are just below the breadline who don't get free school meals, but they could do with free school meals because they're just £2 over budget. Are we going to be doing anything for those? Can we include those families in this scheme?
So where we're at the moment, Councillor Little, is that the scheme is targeted at eligible children, young people eligible for free school meals, but the guidance does say that other children and young people can participate, but at a cost where we would charge families. I don't necessarily think that's how we would want to do it in Hartlepool. So we are looking at how we can make sure that we do reach as many families as possible. There's a stigmatising, you know, if you go back to, you know, many years ago, there was a stigma associated with free school meals. And therefore, we have to be mindful that just having a project that only targets some children potentially is stigmatising. And as you say, there are many children that are, you know, just above the threshold or still living in poverty, but aren't necessarily eligible for free school meals. So we will do whatever we can to be as inclusive as we can and reach as many children who need our support as we can.
Do you need to come back, so are you quite happy?
No, I'm quite happy with that. Thank you, and that I really do appreciate. Even if we charge 5p each, we can always find 5p on the floor, can't we?
Thank you, Sue. I'll now pass over to Brenda.
Thanks, Lisa. Just very quickly, I think that it's about time that the government supported the kind of work that's already been done over the years by Hartlepool, and I think that it will help to sustain the good work that's already been done. I also liked the idea of having a coordinator, appointing someone to coordinate this. I think it's vital that it's all coordinated and everyone knows what they're doing. And there was another thing, which I can't just remember, but I think it's absolutely great. Oh, yes, the other thing was, I would like to actually see it in half term as well.
Okay, so let's get Easter out of the way first, if that's okay, because I've got to be honest, Brenda, I desperately need a coordinator, because right now it's me, and I'm having a minor meltdown at being able to try and get this off the ground for Easter, as colleagues on the call will know. But I've got a real coalition of the willing. There's some brilliant officers in the council. The steering group now is in place and stepped up, but I do need somebody who can manage the project and coordinate it. And once we get Easter through, and I need to understand the implications as well of the COVID winter grant scheme, because then, you know, obviously that then changes slightly. What you know, we may or may, what funding we may or may need at Easter for the food offer. So we need to understand the implications of that. But as I say, that's only just come through, so haven't quite got to grips with that yet.
Thank you. Thank you, Brenda. Shane, you had your hand up. Did you have everything answered?
Yeah, I did. It was Brenda mentioned most of the comments there. It just struck me. I'm really supportive of it, but it just struck me, Sally, that it's effectively the scheme that we wanted to run about 18 months, 2 years ago, when the government were doing a pilot and we run successful for. So it's really good to see that it's actually been rolled out further from there, and I just hope it is successful.
So do I.
Yeah, we all do. I mean, I'm all for educating people to be able to open a cupboard and throw a meal together on as little as you possibly can, to be able to have a hot, nutritious meal. As I said previously in the STEA group meeting, I used to teach for adult education on cooking on a budget and how to get families talking while cooking in the kitchen. So I think food is a fantastic way to be able to keep families together and be able to learn. It's a great learning environment. Leslie?
Yeah, it's just a query really, Sally. Do you get support from like you know, like Fair Share and organisations like that in terms of means of support, or do they not? Do you not get any? I'm just thinking of it as an outside agency. I give to Fair Share. That's why I'm asking the question. Really, if our children and families benefit from any of that in Hartlepool.
I think they do. We have on the steering group, we have a representative from the Food Council, newly developed Food Council in Hartlepool. So they're well tapped into those various initiatives that exist across the town. So we will be tapping into that as part of the work that we're doing to deliver the food offer.
Right. Oh, great. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there's nothing else. So we just need to note that a further report will be coming back to committee following the delivery of the programme at Easter. There is item 8. I've agreed with Sally that there will be another note under the business which Chair considers urgent. So I will pass you back over to Sally now.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you for taking this, any other business. It's just an item that's come in the past week, and it's helpful to just conclude it under this municipal year. So members of the committee will know that following our Ofsted inspection of services for children with special educational needs and disabilities, we run a written statement of action that required us to be monitored by NHS England and the Department for Education. We had a 12-month progress review meeting on the 3rd of February 2021, and I'm just going to read some of the headlines from the letter that we received. Thank you to you and your colleagues for meeting with Senior Department for Education and NHS England advisors and officials on the 3rd of February to review the progress you have made against your SEND Accelerated Progress Plan. You expressed thanks to our school representatives and also the Parent Carer Forum who also attended the meeting. I was pleased to hear that you have made clear and sustained progress against the activity in your APP and that your work is having a positive impact on SEND service delivery in Hartlepool. In your APP, there were 2 key areas of focus based on the issues highlighted in your Ofsted inspection. These were tackling the inconsistencies in the timeliness and effectiveness of the local areas arrangements to identify and assess children and young people's special educational needs and disabilities, and to strengthen your approach to joint commissioning of services for children and young people. Both in your paperwork and during your progress review, you have demonstrated that the timeliness and quality of education, health and care plans has improved. The relationship between the Council, the CCG and the Parent Carer Forum has also strengthened. Parents spoke about 6 weekly meetings and about being involved in the production of the JSNA and the commissioning decisions which have followed. Based on the evidence provided, we now expect you to undertake the following actions: to include the post-16 sector in your EHCP audit process, consider how to increase the richness of response captured by the parent carer feedback mechanisms, and continue to build on the improved relationships between the Council, the CCG and the Parent Carer Forums. In view of the progress you have made, it is the opinion of the Department and NHS England that formal monitoring via the 6 monthly progress reviews is no longer necessary. I know that this result comes as a result of a great deal of commitment and hard work on part of the local authority, the clinical commissioning group, families and frontline staff across education, health and social care. It then just goes on to conclude aspects of the letter. So this is just really to let the committee know that we are no longer now under monitoring of the Department for Education for the delivery of our SEND services, but we will continue to work with our local advisor, which all local authorities do. So we're back into the mainstream, which is great news, and really just to thank everybody who has worked really hard to deliver the improvements that were identified in that inspection.
Brilliant.
I can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
I was eating a mint, so I thought I better put myself on mute. Sorry, Jim, I saw your hand. Didn't just see your hand up there. Do you want to come in? No, you're on mute, Jim.
Just quite briefly, Chair. I think it's important, Sally, that it is acknowledged. It's great to have a letter of confidence in the system that you're improving the issues that they've raised in the past. I've been under special measures at Brereton and Cat Court, and it puts a hell of a lot of pressure on individuals and the corporation itself. So to get that, it's really a glowing report, and I think it's important that we as members acknowledge the hard work that you and the staff have put into that. So I would say thank you for all the efforts for you and your team to make those improvements. Really important that say to the staff, you get a pat on the back that you've come out with special measures, and now it's onward and upwards. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jim. Yes, and I will totally second that I was while I was on mute. So that concludes this evening's meeting. There is no other meeting booked in. So I will say good evening and thank you very much.